Thank you so much for being here. What a beautiful afternoon, made all the better from seeing all of your faces. So really appreciate everyone being here. I'm Diana Martin. I'm the executive director here at Hourglass, and really thrilled to welcome you to today's First Friday Forum with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. Today's forum is about a challenge that affects all of us. Many people know that Lancaster County the majority of our streams are considered impaired, and the Clean Water Partners are working on a very inspiring goal, clean and clear water in our community by 2040. So we are excited to dive into how this vision is turning into action. Today we're joined by Allyson Gibson, Executive Director of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. She's been here since 2018, leading the organization. Allyson brought along two of the collaborators. They put the partner in partners. So she brought some partners along today. We have Terry Martin from Caernarvon Township. We practiced pronouncing it a few times before the forum, so I felt prepared. It's Welsh, by the way. And we have Mike Hudson, who's the outreach coordinator for the Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake. So really excited to hear more about some of the projects that they're working on to bring clean water to our community. And as always, after the speakers and presentations, we'll have time for some questions and discussion. Before we get started, I have two things that I want to note. First, of course, thank our sponsors, Rogers & Associates for making the forum possible, the Ware Center for hosting us, and Shoemaker for doing our live streaming services. I also wanted to note, in case there's anyone who wasn't aware, that today is my last day officially at Hourglass. I'm starting a new role Monday as the Director of High Impact at the High Foundation. We'll be overseeing affordable housing and environmental initiatives there, and very excited to say I'll be continuing to collaborate with many of you in this room, including the Clean Water Partners. We'll be working on projects like in a new environmental center here in the city of Lancaster on Sunnyside Peninsula. I see Susan waiting in the wings, so I'm gonna yeah, please.
I'm here to say thank you to Diana for her 3.5 years of amazing service.
Thank you.
With flowers. I really need to acknowledge that Diana, in many ways, made you all friends. Not just partners, but friends. And I could hear it as you came in. But to Hourglass, she's the one that put us on the map. She created or recreated some of our most beloved projects, like First Friday Forum, which have become incredibly successful. She also has been a guiding light for us as we negotiate some of the challenging issues we face. But it's also, I think, a real credit to Diana that she made long-standing friends, like the number of times we've heard from the water partners, the Clean Water Partners, because it's important and it's ever-changing. So my thanks to Diana for her service, her vision, and her leadership, and we wish her every good fortune as she goes on to work with Robin and the High Foundation. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Very sweet. Thank you. Well, that was a lot more to do than I was expecting, so thank you all very much. And like I said, I very genuinely hope to stay connected. I'll be in the neighborhood, so please continue to collaborate with me in my new role, and I look forward to working with all of you. And with that, I'm going to sit down and hand it over to Allyson, so thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Diana, for the invitation. I don't think we knew it when we started setting this up that it would be your last day. However, it is a wonderful launch point, as you have been such a strong collaborator and part of this partnership. So eager to dive into some of that story and what it can look like even as we start the next chapter together. So I have a slide that starts off with the power of a diverse collaborative network. Nothing about clean water. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But I'm curious to see and hear some of your reactions of perception versus reality about conservation. We think it can be as simple as, look, a grant was awarded, or this is a great headline of millions of dollars dedicated to clean water. We get checks, there's press events, dirt starts moving right away, and poof, you have restoration, right? That's how simple it is? Sure, definitely not. So perceptions can often seem like conservation is easy and happens really fast. This is the funding matrix that we often use to figure out what will pay for what. It feels like we're bumping into each other. There's so many people doing this. Which logo is which? You belong to the Chesapeake, what? And so, yes, we have wins along the way. There are things that we celebrate all the time. That's important. The difference between a plan and a reality, though, can be the amount of time, can be the number of partners, the complexity of some of these projects. So I say all that because really what we're doing with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners is trying to align everyone's goals, tighten up this work, getting things moving in a coordinated fashion, all towards one common goal of clean and clear by 2040. We have this amazing tool in the state of Pennsylvania. Our state constitution gives us the right to clean water, pure air, and the preservation of natural resources. So for all of us, this is an amazing tool that other states do not have. As we zoom in a little bit, a reminder that in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, it's 64,000 square miles, 6 different states. Pennsylvania has the largest portion of that as far as fresh water is concerned. So the Susquehanna River is draining into the Chesapeake, and that provides about 45% of the fresh water that's entering into the Chesapeake. Lancaster County itself has many different watersheds. So when I talk about a watershed, it's the area of land that drains into a body of water. And the other pieces of Lancaster County, none of these boundaries are going to overlap because that would be too easy about that complexity. There are 60 different municipalities. About 2/3 of them have their own MS4 permit. That means they have to manage their stormwater and the runoff that comes from their roads and impervious surfaces. We're at the top of a list for a lot of Chesapeake things. We're also at the top of a list for a number of other exciting pieces. So when we get to be at the top of the list for best places to retire, that means that our community also has to include public health, land use planning. We have so many amazing, smart, and talented and excited people moving to Lancaster because they want to be here. And that also means that we get to work with senior living communities for green master plans. How can we make sure that there is a volunteer component to this, that there is a way our land use planning reflects these priorities that we have? Also have EPA inspections. This is one of those things that sparks a lot of people's interest to say, well, if that's coming, then what do I need to change now? Or how do we avoid that? We also need to make sure our recreation is included and is accessible. The water, if it's not cleaned enough to actually step in or to be in a canoe, we're missing out on a huge element of our population. And that's a resource for all of us. If the bugs can't even live in our water, then we're in real trouble. So you heard that our waters are impaired. And that means that even the bugs can't live here. So a quick snapshot of time. We acknowledge that there has been thousands of years of Native Americans before 1700 using our land. However, that was done in a very sustainable way for the most part. So I'm giving you a snapshot, a condensed timeline of how things have been here in Lancaster. First, farms were cleared, 2 industrial revolutions. The Clean Water Act was signed in the 1970s, and that little red spot on the side is where we're trying to do all this restoration. So thinking about how much has happened and how much we're trying to do in a very short amount of time, putting it in context helps us feel a little bit better, and then also thinking of that complexity and the amount of time that when you start maybe with an idea of funding, an idea of a project, you start to add in funding, permitting, and the things where we quickly ran through in that perception. It's important to give ourselves a little bit of grace because over half of our streams are considered impaired. We have some of the highest loading rates of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment in the Chesapeake Bay. However, we have a solution. And our solution is to build and sustain that multi-sector collaboration. So I will say that a small group came together in about 2015, 2016. That included a county commissioner, the Economic Development Company, the Lancaster Chamber, the City Department of Public Works, an ag accounting firm, the Turkey Hill Dairy, the CEO of Turkey Hill Dairy at the time. Really, these pieces resonated with them. Their clients were saying, I can't build, I can't expand my business because of the permitting requirements. If EPA comes in and starts adding things, then this is going to really impact my nonprofit or my municipality. So that small group of leaders in Lancaster was really visionary with their thinking and came together to say we need to collaborate in a different way. They expanded that group in 2016, 2017, and included Lancaster Farmland Trust, Conservation District, and a number of others. That became our initial steering committee. They hired their first staff person in January of 2018. I was very fortunate to be in that position and have been able to be with the organization since then. What we have now is a shared vision, clean and clear by 2040. That used to be clean and clear within a generation. Well, people started to say, well, whose generation? Is that yours? Is that mine? Is that my grandkids? So we made sure to align with things like Places 2040. Places 2040 has a lot of common things that cross over with clean water, but it also had a lot of community voices in it. So those are the types of tools that were initially part of this collaborative effort. But I want to call out the mission in particular, because as a collaborative network, our mission is to support the capacity of our partner organizations and what they're doing. So I am not out planting trees every day, as much as I would love to. My job is to make sure that the Alliance for the Chesapeake, or the Lancaster Farmland Trust, or Caernarvon Township has what they need to do more and more of their work. That might be funding, that might be permitting process improvements, that might be leadership training. So our job is to make sure that all the groups doing the clean water work can do more of it and at a bigger scale. Common agenda is one tool that helps us get there. Our values are something that helps us get there, and these are pretty essential pieces of how we're going to be successful. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I will call out that our newsletters this year have focused on one at a time. So there's really great examples of partner work that are tied to one of these values each month. Okay, quick numbers. You don't even need to read all these things. Just know that the big one at the top is Lancaster. Like I said, we're at the top of the list for a lot of things. 11 million pounds is the goal that Lancaster has to reduce our nitrogen. We are 21% of the state goal to reduce nitrogen. We are 23% of the phosphorus. Those are the two main nutrients that are the drivers for Chesapeake Bay related reductions. For Lancaster, we're talking local water first. It is in that watershed, so it flows downstream. We know that the biggest opportunity to achieve that is going to come from agriculture. Well, in Lancaster, agriculture is a pretty big deal, a pretty important part of our culture, and so having, again, context of what that means. We have 5,000 farms in Lancaster County. Think about that, 5,000 farms. That's more than some states in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So the average size is only 71 acres. Across the state, the average size is 144. That's a lot of doors to knock on. That's a lot of farmers to build trust with if you're going to ask them to make improvements in order to reach these clean water goals. Well, why does it matter to him or her? How can we increase the trust? How can we make sure that their legacy is represented in these changes that are tied really importantly to water quality, but are also tied to lots of different partner goals? So real quickly, rather than trying to address 5,000 farms at once, we have decided to look at that impaired waters list. These are a couple of the pieces that are tied to what it means to be impaired. And I just call out that benthic macros, IBI, that's the bugs. So I mentioned earlier, if the bugs can't live here, then we're in real trouble. Well, that's one of the ways that we measure, that the state measures whether a stream is impaired or not. So enter the stream delisting strategy. We're looking at three main things. The areas you can see called out on the map, rather than look at the entire county, what are some priority places? What are the places that are going to recover the fastest? So we're not looking at the worst of the worst. We're looking at the ones that are closest to being able to be taken off that impaired list. Efficient implementation. So where can we work with farmers, work with landowners, work with forest landowners for efficient implementation? Get the projects in the ground, meet the goals of that area, and move on to the next one so that we're using our resources well and we're not spending all of our time knocking on every single door. The building momentum is another key part. If there's a church that is already doing green infrastructure, they have a green team, let's start there. You're not making cold calls. You're not starting from scratch. So understanding the landscape, what the partners are already doing, that helps us decide where to go first. So these three things help us prioritize where to go. This is a map of the priority areas across the county. And there is a gentleman I'd like you to hear from who is a really key part of this. Shameless plug for Clean Water Conversations as our podcast. You can find it on iHeartRadio or Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts.
I enjoy working with people, and I particularly enjoy the process of going into a watershed. And a watershed, again, is that area of land that drains into a particular waterway, right? And so that watershed might be a tiny little stream that flows through a neighborhood. And I just find it challenging and just endlessly interesting to be working in a neighborhood watershed like that, which means farmers, homeowners, some business people, and introduce this idea to them that the stream, while there's larger forces at work that are out of their control that are affecting that stream, so much of the quality of that little creek is in their hands, right?
Yeah.
And we as experts, and I can bring a lot of ideas and scientific findings that we've been working on at Stroud Water Research Center. I can bring that kind of professional advice to the table, but we need people from every walk of life to actually embrace this mission and make it their own. Take it away from the experts and own it and get excited about it, because ultimately it is their little immediate resource that is going to be better in the future.
Right. Yeah.
And I just love that process of trying to move this out of the hands of the experts, the technicians like myself, and kind of embed it into the community so that it's theirs.
So that's Lamont Garber, and he works for Stroud Water Research Center. I'll say he's the #1 download on the podcast so far. But he's also known as the trusted local guy. Like, if you need to talk to an Amish landowner, you call Lamont. And he will help you plant trees. He will make sure that you know if there's an Amish holiday that day. So it's one of those local experts. He lives in Lancaster City, has grown up here, and just fantastic to be part of this partnership. He's been one of the catchment leads as well. So rather than one of the ways we use our catchment leads is to have them know what's going on in specific areas. So I'll give you one example, and I'm going to let these two gentlemen talk about some other examples. But one of our specific catchments is Stauffer Run. So this is an area where Greenfield is. This is where there are a number of farms, and part of it, there's 2 different municipalities, but it's one small watershed, one little creek that has a drainage area, and there's a lot of momentum here. There has been a school that's been doing visits to the creek for years and years. I have to give a shout out because Carrie Snavely was my teacher and an inspiration for me through all of this. But a lot of progress has happened within this small watershed. Farmers are making changes, High Industries is making changes, and the landscaping crews are going through training about native plants, about habitat advocacy. So there is active work in this area, and we know that we're really close to getting that stream taken off the impaired list. Now, when I say really close, I'm not talking next year. I'm talking 10 years down the road. Ecosystem recovery is like health for our native plants, for our creeks and rivers. That takes time. And so when we talk about stream delisting, I'll give you the honest answer is we used to call it rapid stream delisting because in environmental terms, rapid could be 10 years. But it doesn't resonate as well. So these are some of the lessons learned as we do this collaborative work that we've got to make sure our messaging is there as well. So a few other examples within this is a church that Mike has been working with. They put in a rain garden. So this is Church of the Good Shepherd, Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd. They put in a rain garden. They had a blessing of the rain garden. They've now started taking out parking spaces and putting in green infrastructure. So making physical changes. They have a creation care committee is what they call it, right? And so that group may be driving internally, but working with the township, working with contractors to implement this work is really amazing. And they are driving it from an internal, there is an internal drive to make that happen. There's a really great quote here. I'm not going to read it to you, but I hope that you can get pieces of that for today. But there's pride in this work. a humble pride, that is appropriate for Lancaster County, but a pride in these decision-making process and the local ownership of being able to do this on their property and be an example for others. So progress, is it working? Well, I'll give you a couple pieces. So this is a Chesapeake Bay watershed again. So the hot spots, like the heat map, Lancaster County has so much happening here. This bright yellow is where more best management practices or the shovels in the ground kind of implementation, that's where it's happening. And so there is demand for this. It is one of my favorite parts. I am not pulling teeth for this work. There is so much interest, there's so much commitment to this, and it really is making a difference. So the progress is happening. A huge shout out to our municipalities. This is from an article from LNP, and this shows the dollars invested from the American Rescue Plan, the money that was given to the municipalities. So overall, water infrastructure was the #1 way that our municipalities spent their money. That's huge, over $10 million. And that includes everything from sewer, stormwater, drinking water. It's a combination, but water infrastructure is a huge priority for our municipalities. So it's a fantastic example of how bringing together all the different diverse sectors helps benefit each other. These municipalities are also the ones working with the churches. How do we get more involved with our ag community to benefit the permits that they might need? So a great example here. A few other ways that the funding has really increased. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is giving multiple million dollar grant awards to groups in Lancaster County. The Agriculture Conservation Assistance Program is state cost share money in agriculture coming to counties that didn't exist before. So it's called ACAP. Lancaster County has received $15 million over the last 3 years just for agriculture. We put in an application yesterday for the countywide action plan, and that is a tool that we have created at the state's invitation. Again, all the counties within the Bay watershed have it. That has an application that went in yesterday for $6.9 million of still more demand for agriculture and the ways that that can support municipalities and some other wetland-specific projects, stream work. There is money from private family foundations. There is money from a couple other sources. So I give you that as one snapshot. But again, the demand is there. The scale and the resources have been growing, but we still have more to go with that big, big goal that we have. So this is just a couple examples of the many voices and perspectives that have to be part of this in order to achieve those local goals and accurately reflect what is happening on the ground. So in the bottom left is Adam Ortiz with the EPA. He's the regional administrator. Bringing him into town to talk with other funders as well as agency staff so that we can coordinate from the highest level down to the local level. Working with our catchment leads, looking at maps, saying, this person is all on board, let's go, or this person had 4 people visit them last week and you should not go talk to them about their stream anymore. Or this one, I know that he has the permit, but he needs the funding, and how can we get it to him? And we work together to do that. So talking as a whole community, things like Lancaster Water Week, things like volunteer trainings. There's a lot of work happening, so having so many voices and perspectives involved is a huge way that this work succeeds. We also have a Watershed Leadership Academy. Our 2025 cohort is starting in January, and it's really exciting to have 20 applicants for this year. So this is our 3rd time we're offering it. It blends watershed science and leadership development. How are we gonna get the next generation involved? How are we gonna get people who are not involved in conservation at all, but really could be? So in the past, we've had marketing experts, we've had urban planners, we've had bankers, we've had volunteers, and many of them have really jumped in and either shifted their career or taken on a board role within a conservation group. So there's lots of ways that our academy helps bring in new people, but then pushes them back out to support you all and to engage with other places around Lancaster to include water as part of that. One other quick piece is to show you that we are measuring our impact. Like I said, what progress is happening. This is one way, is surveying our partners, so you're getting kind of a sneak peek on results of a survey. And I know it's not real exciting to look at a bar graph of a survey, so just real quickly that the organization has, my organization, that's the question to them, can have a greater impact because of our relationship with other participants? Those are the kinds of questions to measure our progress. So we talk about how close are we getting with water quality. Also, what's the impact of the network? We're measuring all kinds of different parts of this. And then trying to show it visually. This is a map, basically a social map, of all the partner organizations doing this work together. But there's something missing. Who can tell me what's not on here? Lines. Yes, we need lines. So where we are right now, we just had our full partners meeting earlier this week with 100 people there, and we prompted them to fill it in so that we know what their connections are. Maybe you work with somebody very casually, or you don't get to see them all the time, so that would be a light connection. If you're in projects all the time and co-funding things, then it's a stronger connection. So the lines are going to look different. This will ultimately be a tool for our partners to say, oh, I'm actually connected with them. I can do more there. Or I have a lot to do. I need to make more connections, and how can I do that? So this is another kind of tool that we're using for the network. And all of this requires multi-year support. It's pretty essential because we can only move at the speed of trust. I think, Bob, you were saying that earlier, that trust building is so essential. We use Stephen Covey's book as our textbook for the Watershed Leadership Academy. Having funding from many of those sources that I mentioned, having it yearly and in phases for local decision-making, that allows us to be strategic but also reactive to those opportunities as they come around. This one's pretty important to me, is operating with an attitude of abundance, not scarcity, allows bigger visionary thinking. And that's where we get to function. We need to make sure that the capacity is there for all of our partners. And being able to be in that space of abundance makes such a difference as you're building interest and integrating multiple missions and goals across the network. This is all more than one organization can do at a time. Again, we exist to support everyone else. So the network is that facilitator of collaboration and trying to up the scale of all of this so we can meet those really big goals, because clean and clear by 2040, it's going to take some work. But we have seen such progress. And a reminder, this summer, a report card came out that said the best score in 22 years. That's huge. 22 years since the score for the Susquehanna has been that good. So good that they wanted the press announcement in Pennsylvania. The Shapiro administration wanted to be the voice to say it, along with EPA standing right there with him. So a Chesapeake Bay-related announcement came to Pennsylvania on purpose, had the governor and the EPA there to announce it and share these kinds of updates about the progress in 22 years, but I'll say in Lancaster, within the last 6 or 7, there's been this real big ramp up. And it's thanks to all of you. It's thanks to all of the partner organizations doing this work. So let's hear directly from them. I'm going to turn it over to Terry Martin so you can hear what the amazing work is that's happening in Caernarvon Township.
Thank you, everybody. I was hoping we'd be singing in the rain this morning, but that didn't happen. It's very dry out there, especially if you're from the ag community. We've been working with the partners a little bit. Right there's Caernarvon Township. You can see it. Yeah, the slide's a little bit different, but that's okay. There we go. Okay, so a lot of people don't know where Caernarvon is. I pretty much tell them it's halfway between Shady Maple and the Turnpike in Morgantown. And they usually figure it out pretty quick. But this basin that goes up through there, it drains into the Little Conestoga, and we'll get into that. There's 2 Little Conestogas, just so everybody knows. But that's the one we've been focusing on. We have an Ag Advisory Committee down there, and they've been very, very aggressive, okay? 2 or 3 of these guys are Mennonites, 2 or 3 of them are Amish. And then you have Gary Van Dyke, the vet, who's been instrumental in a lot of this. But in Caernarvon, we have 14,500 total acres, okay? 9,000 are zoned ag. 7 of those 9,000 are in the ag security area. And we preserved, at this time, 3,223 acres. So now I'm going to be honest, we're Landfill Township, so we have some resources to advance that agenda, but it's just great that we're able to do that. And we have the farmers who are buying in so many different levels, not just with the preservation, but everything else. So this is the catchment basin, Hammertown Run. It's an unnamed tributary, but as Lamont said, you get to the top of that, it's kind of like the Continental Divide. It's where Derby Sisters Nursing Home is. Part of it goes to Black Creek, part of it goes to the Conestoga River, and the other part goes to the Little Conestoga, which comes together in Weaverland and forms what would be the Conestoga River. So the focus has been on this basin. We've had very good luck, with the studies and what Lamont's finding, or Stroud and everybody else is learning up top. Plus, we've had farmers who are starting to buy in. This is the Hammertown Run 10 years ago, okay? Now, I would like to note a couple things here. It's wintertime, and what you're seeing here is a lot of green grass, okay? These guys have gotten very good at cover crops. It's like putting your fields to bed for the winter, and they don't want to lose their topsoil. They're conservationists. So these guys are very, very progressive, and they work really, really hard to protect their land. This is Hammertown Run in spring of 2024. So all these guys have bought in, and with the help of Stroud and everybody else, into buffering this little creek. I like the strategy, and I'm going to summarize a little bit more by saying, by the inch it's a cinch, by the yard it's hard. To focus on small areas, okay, and then it gets infectious. We were talking to Doc Hollister. I was talking to him about how infectious this gets. Now this goes into Little Conestoga. The neighbors upstream and downstream are starting to buffer their properties. And so it's really amazing. And they're doing it themselves. We don't have nothing to do with it in Caernarvon Township. I mean, they're selling it to themselves. So, our content, whole farm conservation, including buffers, measure changes to streams over long terms. That's our goal. I mean, if we can just, there you go. I mean, you got Lamont out there, and he is the guy to talk to. He told me one time, Terry, we spent 300 years screwing it up. We're not going to fix it overnight. And he's right. He's right. But by the inch it's a cinch, by the yard it's hard. So we did have a couple meetings out there in Caernarvon. This group here was from the actual catchment basin. And then what we did was we had a follow-up meeting, okay, with the property owners and the landowners who are not engaging in ag. A lot of it's forested. I mean, if you go back up into the very, very top of this, it's almost like being in Canada. I got to tell you, it's just beautiful up in there. So we had the meeting with them, and here you can see one of the original buffers. It was, 10 years ago now? That's Raymond Lee King's, and we went through there, and to have all those guys see it, okay, these are the guys that seen it and said, you know what, that's kind of nice. I kind of like that. And that's what they did. They bought in. They're conservationists, and they want to be able to conserve. So that's about all I have. It's just exciting stuff going on out in Caernarvon. So, and other municipalities as well.
So my name is Mike Hudson. I am the Pennsylvania Outreach Coordinator for Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the same things that we've been doing here, but I also want to talk a little bit about where we in the congregations come in, because Allyson kind of alluded to this, that we have a particular role that we play in this partnership, and that is that we know that all of our faith communities in Lancaster, all around the country, have some kind, all of them, of recognition of the importance of environmental stewardship and preservation. It is expressed in different ways, and I'll have a slide up here in a minute that I believe shows a couple of those. But essentially, all of the faith communities have something that gets to inspiring and equipping people of faith to honor, protect, and restore our shared watershed. So that's our mission at IPC. And these are some of the ways that we come at this, some of the kind of background that I just like to show people, because some people don't know. A lot of folks are like, really, are there faith communities that think these things, and why and how? And so I just like to throw this up on the board, that this is kind of where we are starting from. This is what we're looking at, some of the ideas that we're using to reach out to these communities, why we can be effective doing this, because there is already an understanding of the importance of some of this stuff. And so what does that end up looking like in what we do? So we do a bunch of different things. One of the things that we do, like Allyson said, is we help congregations do work on their properties. So I have here some pictures of some work that is being done. Most of these are from Ascension Lutheran Church, which is a congregation that started doing work actually through the rapid delisting, the stream delisting strategy, was how they were found and became involved in this. But that's not the only way that we help. That's not the only way that we're supporting this effort. That's a big part of what we do. That's a significant part of what I spend my day-to-day on. But we recognize that there's other things that have to be done to make this work in the long term, to support the communities that want to do this, to help it grow and spread naturally beyond what we can do. And so we do things like Allyson mentioned, there are congregations that have creation care teams. There are congregations that have green teams. There are some denominations within the Christian communities where they have set, declared from the head of the denomination a policy about this is what we think as a church about the environment. And so we can take those things, we can take some of that stuff and meld our training, meld our education, meld our outreach to that, to what we know that these communities already are kind of thinking about and doing. So one of the things that we offer that's really successful in the Lancaster area in particular, it's been popular, is a Faithful Green Leader training. So say a congregation comes to us and they would love to be involved in this. Their denomination has a statement about the importance of the environment. There's folks at the church who want to do something, but they have no idea where to start. They have no one in the congregation's ever done this kind of thing before. The pastor doesn't know what to do, so what do? Well, one of the things that we offer are these Faithful Green Leader trainings. So those folks can come to us a couple times a year, and we'll go through them in a training program, not only talking about what is the environment and what is stormwater and why do faith communities think that's important, but how do you talk to your other congregants about this? How do you convince your clergy that this is important? How do you then go about finding grant assistance? What are the partners in your region, like Lancaster Clean Water Partners or in other parts of the watershed? Who are the technical partners you can work with? And that's the part that a lot of the congregations and a lot of these sort of less traditional partners, they don't have that. They might have the energy, they might have the interest, they might have some of the background knowledge of why the environment is important, but they don't necessarily have the what do we do from there? How do we take that and do something with it? And that's really what we're doing. We call ourselves the connector in the puzzle piece, where we're bringing all the pieces that the congregations need together and helping them use that to do something, to make some progress on the ground. And we've worked in Lancaster County with about, it's around 20-some congregations now. There are a bunch. This sort of is an example of some of the ones that in the whole watershed that we're working with. We started in Maryland. Pennsylvania was the second state that we moved into, really mostly Lancaster County so far. We're just now beginning to dip our toes into Dauphin and Lebanon counties a little bit. So 20-ish some in the Lancaster area, and about a dozen of those I would say are fairly consistently engaged beyond that initial contact with us. They keep coming to events. They've done things on their property. They still have an active creation care team. And these are some of the other things they can do for that. We have pledges that they can sign that say what they're going to do, that establish that they have a concern about this, that they're dedicated to this. We have ways that we can keep up with the congregations after they've gone through the trainings to make sure that they're getting the support downstream that they need. And we just think that that's really the important part of our side of the partnership is making sure that we can bring the message and sort of bring some of the information that exists to congregations, to folks who wouldn't get it otherwise but are interested, are willing to be involved. So thanks for having us and letting us chat a little bit.
Well, I am so grateful to have two of our superstar partners here. We have about 60, a little over 60 partners that have officially signed up as partner organizations. We are not a membership or dues-based group, so you can sign the form online and be considered an official partner with the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. And so with that being said, I want to give you a couple ways to get involved. What can you do after you've heard all this amazing information and you want to do something? Well, a lot of different options. We have a newsletter, a podcast, social media. Be a voice for conservation, whether that's at your own organization, whether you're on a board, whether you want to or are considering being part of your local government. That can be a way that you get engaged and bring clean water to the forefront. We have action teams that serve as on-ramps for some people to get involved in this at the level that they want to. So if you're really interested in riparian buffers, then you can join that action team. Each of these only meets once every 3 or 4 months. There's a communications action team that helps with that shared messaging. The riparian buffer team focuses in on the expertise and the professionals doing riparian buffers. There is a stormwater action team that includes a group of engineers that meets twice a year, and we just 2 weeks ago held our annual MS Forum, which is an annual event like a conference style for public works staff, engineers, municipal staff to come together. And we have a water quality monitoring action team. So if you're really jazzed by those bar graphs and numbers and how are we changing those nutrient loading rates, that's your place. That's your place to get involved. Volunteer, whether it's at a tree planting, this time of year is planting season. It has been super dry, so there has been not quite as many plantings, but the rain this morning will help with that. So definitely encourage you to volunteer. Maybe that's you as an individual, maybe that's your family, maybe that's your company that wants to come out and bring your entire team for a team building day. Our partner organizations are very willing to have whatever level and whatever volume you want to bring to those kind of pieces. Donations to the Backbone organization are an option through our website, but I also want to introduce a concept about the Clean Water Fund, which is at the Community Foundation. That's something that we created in 2018, and it is intended to be a collaborative tool for decision making, or excuse me, for donation making. And decision. It is actually both, because it was intentionally created that way, because we don't decide, we as the Clean Water Partners don't decide what happens with those dollars. There's a group of local advisors, volunteers who play that role, and all the money that comes into the Clean Water Fund goes back out to support the projects, many of what you saw in today's images. So those are a couple ways you can take action. Would love to have more discussion or answer any questions and give some specific examples, because that's what we are here to do, is to be storytellers. Talk about the amazing work that's happening, the progress that we're seeing, and how more of us in Lancaster can be part of that. So really, thank you for being part of it in your way and for being here today. I have a couple resources if you want to take hard copies, but a lot of what we've mentioned is available on our website as well. So I will turn it back to Diana, and any questions? Yeah.
Raise your hand high if you have any questions or comments for our speakers. I'm going to start with a trivia question. Does anyone know how many miles of streams we have in Lancaster County? I figure one of you might know. Any guesses? More? 1,400, is that right? Okay, there you go, 1,400. So that was our first. I saw a question here, and raise your hand high if you have any questions or comments for our speakers.
Thanks for presenting, really appreciate it. Allyson, my question is for you. Can you shed light? That's the first I have ever seen that municipalities may not have MS4 requirements. Can you maybe comment on that, or one of you comment on that?
We might tag team on this one. MS4 currently, as a permit, is determined by census block, right? And
This is what I've heard. My engineer said this, but Ben might be able.
Yeah,
sometimes it gets convoluted, but
Answer this.
less than 5,000, less than 1,000 people in the urbanized area, in an urbanized area,
Yeah.
or as deemed necessary by the department. So that kind of lets you know where we'll be at. I'm hoping that's pretty close to correct, Ben.
Diana, can I turn this to Ben Weber, who can probably answer this
Okay,
even better
we'll go
than
here,
I
and then we'll go over there.
Sure, there's also the awkward application for a waiver that you have to complete. And then that's what opens the doors for all the DEP determined requirements. So yeah, you're below a certain threshold, but if you've got anything else that the DEP wants to stick their nose into, that application process opens the door for them.
That urbanized area is the essential part that triggers it initially.
It's an initial threshold,
Right,
right? Yeah.
right.
We have an area with 71 people in the urbanized area. So that's well under 1,000, but, there is still a waiver process. There's a bunch of municipalities getting waivers. It costs almost as much for a waiver as it does for your permit, but, and we work really hard in Caernarvon, I think to educate and inform our residents. We've had a couple stormwater meetings. I mean, I didn't buy into the stormwater ordinance But now I'm kind of bought in hook, line, and sinker because you can see the difference it's making.
The other piece about MS4 that I would say is it is a tool and it can get more work done when there are permit requirements tied to something. But currently the MS4 permit is administratively extended. So it does have a timeline on it. And currently we're waiting for the draft next permit to come out. So the municipalities don't know what their next required reductions are. Information coming soon, hopefully.
So for us lay people, I'm sure the ecology is complicated, but like what are the big ticket items, like the actual physical changes needed in terms of buy-in from farmers and homeowners and businesses along these waterways?
Like I say, I think I talked to some of the neighbors up there when we tried to get this group together, and I spoke to an Amish guy, and he said, Terry, we need clean water. You know, you didn't hear that before. The idea of stormwater was handled, I think, by getting it to a grassy swale as quickly as possible and getting it into the creek. So they're getting infiltration, you know, and it's also about conservation. I talked to another guy who I would have never thought would buffer his farm. I said, why'd you buffer your farm? This was his last one, Garmin. He said, because I want to see rabbits and squirrels on my farm. So that's the kind of stuff that they see. Plus, you get all this additional benefit of clean water, so.
I think some of the price tags attached to what he just mentioned as a riparian buffer could cost a few $1,000s per acre to install it, maintain it, have if you need permitting, like if you're putting in a cattle crossing for part of that, that would change something. If a landowner needs to put in a whole manure storage, like put in a concrete pit, that can be a couple $100,000. When you add in the engineering and the permitting that's required on top of that, if you're putting in a manure stacking shed, anything that's structural, that increases the cost. So when we're talking about $15 million coming in for agriculture, that goes real fast. There are projects that we have had come through that are $1 million for a single parcel, or a municipal project that may be multiple parcels, like Mountjoy Borough is having stream work done. It's over a mile that includes parks, that includes other types of land, and that's a multi-million-dollar project.
And if you don't know what a riparian buffer is, we're just talking about stream-side plantings, right? So
Putting in trees along the edges of the stream, that's a riparian
It gets
buffer.
the temperature of the water down. That's what it does, and that's what brings back the little buggies and the trouts and everything else.
And holds all the soil where it's supposed to be. Those roots play a big, important role.
I have a two-part question. The first is MS4, what does that mean?
Ken, my podcast guy would have buzzed me. He buzzes me when I use unexplained acronyms. Multiple step. No, see, Ben, go ahead.
I like to say it's
Separate
okay. I
stormwater.
like to say it's multiple separate stormwater systems, but it's not. It's multiple separate storm sewer.
system.
So
Municipal.
yeah, municipal. I'm sorry. Yeah. We don't have we don't have sewage in our rainwater in Caernarvon, but that's kind of why it's.
Okay. And then the other part of the question, thank you, by the way.
Yes.
The other part of the question was, I know we focused on ag in this. What role does the commingled sewer water, system play in the total discharge of those pollutants that we want to limit? Do you have a sense about that? I think I'm done.
Okay. That was a question about the combined sewer systems. How is that impacting clean water?
So there are certain parts of the county that have a combined sewer system. So what hits our roads gets combined with what gets flushed down the toilet, and that system gets treated and then put back into a creek. In other places, what hits the road or hits our homes, that goes straight into the creek through the storm drains. Those two systems have lots of history tied to them, lots of infrastructure needs tied to each of them. The city of Lancaster has a combined system, and Mayor Sirachi was one of our speakers this week at the Full Partners meeting, so I would encourage you to go to that page and listen to her speech about water affordability and how these components all really do tie together for how we have to address clean water, because taking water out of the Conestoga to make it drinking water is also an element of this work. Where we have to then put our wastewater back in is often even cleaner than where we get it out.
makes us all go a little nuts when we hear it. At least me.
Terry, you were talking about you weren't a believer at first, and then eventually you became one. I belong to Good Shepherd, and I think it's like water on the rock. At a minimum, every monthly newsletter has a creation care page that Becky Marks does, and it's almost a whole page, so that you can't escape it. Either you don't open the church newsletter, or creation care is right there. It's month after month after month, and there might be an additional squib in the church bulletin on a Sunday morning. It's rat-a-tat-tat.
That's such a great example, and I didn't mention it, but as a network, we use the collective impact model. And so the elements of that are pretty core to how we function, and a major piece of it is continuous communication. That has to be a shared measurement and a shared message as well. So it's wonderful to hear that that continuous communication is part of what is driving and building the momentum in that church. Go ahead, Mike.
And I'll just quickly add to that, that one of the other things that we try and do to amplify that and to make that easier within our system is that we have a Google Group distribution list that is also goes to a lot of the LCWP folks, so that we're communicating all of this to everyone as well. So when Good Shepherd had their rain garden blessing, we put that out wider than just to their own community. When we've done educational offerings with congregations before, we try and open those up to the community. So making sure that that's going not just to within the whatever the local group or whatever the immediate group doing the work right there is, but also that it's getting seen widely to the whole partnership as well.
Terry, knowing the political makeup of Lancaster City versus Lancaster County, and historically reading that the farmers don't want anyone telling what to do, runoff of phosphorus, nitrogen, et cetera, and then also our worriment and concern of blowing up the EPA, et cetera, with what may lie ahead. Hopefully that's not the case. But your presentation to me was rather encouraging. Once again, if you go out and have the conversations with people, at least in your area, would you give us in the room a sense of hope or optimism that the farmers, the residents of Lancaster County who are maybe not politically aligned with us in the city are open to, they want clean water, they don't want pollution, but on the other hand, they don't want to be told what to do. But do you feel that the receptivity on their part is generally good?
I think it's improving. I think there are other areas where the Anabaptist sect is maybe a little bit more conservative yet, and they really don't want to have anything to do with government. Some of these church districts are really getting, I don't want to say progressive, but they are at least listening. And like I say, when you start seeing these successes, you know, they talk a lot on Sundays, okay? And when they get to see these successes, they get to share those successes. So yeah, I think there's, I mean, a lot of the work that they have or have not been doing has been reported. You know, with the 2014 slide, everything being green, in the next slide, you could see examples of no-till farming. I seen something the other day that I don't think I've ever seen. So these guys are drilling in their cover crops this time of year. I seen a farmer out irrigating his cover crops because they're not getting them to grow because there's no water and no moisture. So these guys, there's a lot of them that are really trying hard. You know, and even myself, like I say, I didn't believe it when I first seen it. But one of the best things you can do is just go look at the creek right now, because you can see even after a storm, you can see the bottom of the creek. You can do that in Eastern Lancaster County when I was a kid. You couldn't do that. I tell people, we used to swing on a rope swing off 897. You'd come up out of the water, and cow manure would be running down your head. It's just everything. But that's how country boys were. But they let their cows in the creek. So, but they're not anymore.
I'll just add one more thing to that, because one thing that we've observed a lot is, as we've been expanding our presence, when we were first moving to Lancaster, we were working with the congregations that were easiest to work with, that were the most open to this. And so we started with a lot of very urban city congregations. That's not the case anymore. Like we do not necessarily see that this is, the interest in doing this is limited to the city congregations and those around. We have at least as much, if not more, interest from rural and suburban congregations, especially lately. Ascension Lutheran, as well as our largest current project that we're working on at Hope Episcopal, are both quite rural, bordering farms, actually, and have, in both cases, involved some communication with the farm owners around them. So I just wanted to add that plug into that. We see the same thing within the congregational communities that we work with, just increasing interest, awareness, commitment to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that buy-in, I mean, and you're starting to see that. It's kind of snowballing a little bit, at least from what I'm seeing.
Thank you for sharing today. Other than nutrient runoff, ground sewage, and heat, are there other attributes that are impairing our streams? I mean, what are the other? What's the biggest picture of what's hitting it most?
There are 3 different reasons that a stream could be impaired. That could be that it is impaired for drinking water, could be for those aquatic bugs, or could be for recreation. There could be bacteria levels that would cause that. There could be sediment levels that would cause that. There could be nutrient levels that would cause that. So one of the things that we learned by working with the Department of Environmental Protection in this stream delisting strategy was that celebrating the wins along the way of just changing a cause of impairment is a win. So even if you're not removing, we don't want to remove all the nutrients in a system. And a stream needs some. It needs some dirt in the water to help move things around. But when you can take the levels down to take enough that the system is healthy to be not impaired anymore, that's a win.
Well, let's give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much for being here today. As always, we will have a recording of today's forum up on our website and YouTube channel, so check that out next week. And please mark your calendars for our next First Friday Forum. We'll be back here December 6th learning about the City of Lancaster's new master tourism plan, so that'll be a really interesting forum. I was told I need to hand the mic to Art because he wants to embarrass me.
Yes. I'm Art Mann. I'm one of the founders of the Hourglass. And we started 25 years ago. And we meet in my kitchen every Friday, 7:30 to 9. And we originally started because 25 years ago, we were arguing in this county about farm preservation. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? It's kind of hard to believe. But one of our first actions, we felt that Lancaster County was going to grow out of control with no plan, and you could destroy the quality of life if something wasn't done. So that's how we started. And one of the first things was farm preservation. We held some forums, and finally, I have a letter in my file from the county commission saying, "Okay, Art, here's $25 million. Basically, shut up and please don't bother us anymore." And that was the prevalent attitude. And you fast forward to now, and where we've come and what we try to do as an organization, which is provide a neutral place like this where organizations like this can show what they're doing and how they're doing to improve the quality of life. And I want to commend Diana here as having brought us a long way in the short time she's been with us for the automation, for the website, for the fact we now have this is live streamed on the internet. And I hope that the county appreciates, the board of directors appreciate what she's done. And so I want to sincerely thank you from our board and from the community, which you have served well under the Hourglass, and which you will do even more with the high organization. So thank you very much, Diana, and good luck.
Thank you, Art.
Give her applause.
I think with that, I'll wish you all a good weekend, and yeah, have a great weekend. Enjoy the nice weather. Thanks.